a cautionary tale. My best friend and I knew a fellow quite talented and, spiritually, psychically, magically gifted. He was really good friends with us. We were sort of a little trio for quite some time. And then he got to the point where he was, things weren't necessarily working the way he wanted them to. And I think what happened is the creation somehow slipped from creation to expectation. And it sort of diminished his effectiveness, in essence. I mean, there's more to go along with it, but, that's not the theme of the video. I could turn that into a cautionary tale, but I won't. It's the expectation, I think, that can be a detriment, if we believe in those things still. I mean, I don't know. I'm not in duality right now, but I do believe there's like a gradation scale of, healthy and toxic, It's a scale. It's a scale. It's a scale. It's not duality.
Yeah, it's those expectations are a massive killer.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as we have, it's not so much the expectations, it's the fixed attachment to the expectations which creates the suffering and creates limitations on what can be created. If we're having these fixed ideas about how we think things should be, especially in the spiritual process, because people get attached to these ideas, they may look at people before them that have had these awakenings and look at their life journey and think, oh, that's how it's supposed to go. Well, no, that's their journey. Your journey is something that may be completely different. And if you just stay open to all possibilities, then who knows what might happen. Instead of having these rigid, again, expectations of what should happen.
It's the how. I think that is the gem. It is the how. It is the focus on the how, the means of that manifestation that I think does a lot of folks in. It has to happen this way at this time by these means. If you just let it happen, and once you decide, you decide you're going to dictate such, trivial things, if I may be so egotistical, such trivial things, you start to actually invite other contingent factors. I've noticed. Little quirks and things that sort of, you focus too heavily on one detail to the neglect of another detail. And all of a sudden you get something completely different. You're dictating the means. You're absolutely correct. Do you have a process, if I may ask? How do you create? Yeah.
For me, intuitively, certain feelings, maybe thoughts may come where to lead, to go in a certain direction. And very simply, I just allow that to unfold in the moment. I don't get attached or have, like we've just been chatting about, rigid expectations to anything. I go into it with an open mind, with, okay, let's see what's going to happen. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Whereas, again, like we've said before, if you've got these rigid expectations, you can be setting yourself up for some suffering, because if it doesn't manifest the way that you thought, then suddenly a lot of times people are left thinking, well, what did I do wrong?
Right.
What did I do wrong? So, again, the more we have a range of possibilities open, we leave that space, that room for anything to come in. And often it can be something that is far greater than we even could have imagined it to be. Absolutely. But, so, my process, if you want, is very simple. I just go intuitively with what I feel. So, for instance, to give an example, quite recently, probably about 3-4 weeks ago, I just got this kind of urge to just, it just popped into my mind. It was wood carving. And it's something that very briefly I'd contemplated on doing before. And then it came very strongly. So then intuitively I just went on the computer and began looking at wood carving stuff. 4 weeks later, I've got a workshop downstairs. I've already done a number of carvings. I've had friends and family give me tools, spare tools that nobody wanted. Oh. I've had somebody approach me wanting me to make some kennels for them on quite a regular basis as well. So within a space of 4 weeks, just because intuitively I followed that, all of a sudden all of these, it was something that never, like I say, it's something that never really entered my mind before. I'd contemplated on it very, very, very briefly. All of a sudden it came out of nowhere, and then within 4 weeks I've got a workshop, carvings, all the tools and work as well.
Okay.
So that was that's just a little example there.
All right. So it I guess simplify it maybe for myself. It's almost more as though you just decide, okay, I'm going to go here. I'm going to hop on the train, or my, I guess you could say my higher self, or however you choose to term it, the boatman or ferryman or whatever, get inside and just go, and then it'll just take you where it's going to go. You basically select and then go. It's not, that's actually that's probably the best way, actually, now that I think about it. I mean, I've had things go wrong. So, I always have fail safes in my concoctions sometimes, just in case, so.
I think the difference I've mentioned this on one of my videos before. I think something like how to know the difference between following your head and your heart, or your heart and the conditioned mind. How to know the difference. And again, it goes back to what I've just said about that with the instance that I've just mentioned, is that obviously the heart is the intuitive quality, and when you follow that, you can know it's the heart because it's very simple. It can be a feeling, an urge, and it may come with just a very subtle, thought that yes, I must do this, or yes, I must do that. Whereas the conditioned mind, it mulls things over, and it will constantly tries to break things down and analyze it. And so that's how to know the difference between the two. And what I've found through my experience is that when you follow just this, it takes you in that right direction, and it's usually a genuine path, if you will, as opposed to this, which can lead you down a certain path, which is a dead end.
That's very true.
So.
And perhaps, do you believe that this sometimes, for most often for the better, will undermine what you create with this, in its own sense, or override, I guess you can say. I mean, if there was a way to measure, the power of, once you actually open that up and you start living from the heart, and you actually take up as much space, as you can to be in, complete control. I've noticed, with some folks, it's a little bit different. It's almost as though, the heart is so shut down, living completely out of the mind. There is no, everything is, even though it's paranoid fantasy is permitted to exist. Whereas people who may actually still have those issues, who you can tell are vibrating from the heart, still don't have those. And I believe that, again, there's an expectation that we have to have all those thoughts treated. I really do appreciate your approach to where you're saying, no, just become the observer. You don't have to sit there and, punish yourself, pull teeth over trying to change your thoughts so you never have a negative thought again. Just be aware, of the amount of energy that you feel that thought with. Because I think that this will override that,
Absolutely. The more that we become in touch with this, the more that we become looking from the perspective of the witness, of the perceiver, then you strengthen in that intuitive ability, you strengthen in that awareness, and all of a sudden that takes over. But if you're in the conditioned mind, then that takes over. And so, then everything is happening from that perspective. Sure. But yeah, absolutely. If we come to this place, then it becomes strengthened, and all of a sudden, it's not even like we're making decisions anymore. Yeah. It's not even like you're making choices. It's almost like it's just spontaneously happening, and there's an urge, and off you go.
Well, that's actually, I agree with that. I was actually marveling, at a lot of things that I've been watching people actually have happen. Just wonderful blessings as far as that is concerned. When it comes to that, I guess getting back to this, there's always the issue. We talked about free will for a moment. There is the sharing of space. The sharing of spiritual, personal, social, psychological, emotional space that challenges the best of us, let me tell you. Well, not necessarily, actually, no. But I think that I think that can be a bit of an issue for some folks, because I've noticed, sort of like the house is falling down, or coming down voluntarily, of their own accord, that folks tend to be a little bit apprehensive about doing a sort of purification, knowing that they surround themselves deliberately with toxic relationships, toxic affiliations. It's interesting to see that, a person choose to not raise the frequency of their own self. I mean, I am one to believe that, everything is available energy. The coffee, the cup itself, everything is available energy. That's, serious Nico-alchemy there. And, I do believe that, some people, who've come to me, they've told me in my experience, there's a concern about raising their vibrations, whether or not it's, going to alienate them from their children or, anything like that. I mean, how do you deal with the fact that, this can be a touchy subject, sharing that energetic space with people, I'm terrible at this. I really am. I should have prepared a statement. I really should. I can't even look at you half the time. I'm like, God, I don't know what I'm going to say.
I mean, the spiritual process in itself is not for. It really takes a courageous person, a courageous being, if you will, to go through the spiritual process. And it were interesting what you were just saying about how some people won't. They kind of tend to try and avoid some of that. And I think people in the spiritual journey, sometimes they only go so far. They don't complete the discovery. You know what I mean? They don't go the whole way. They kind of go so far, and then there may be some things that they find really uncomfortable, and they don't want to go even further into that. But like we're just chatting about other people, for me, everything is just a reflection of the inner. And as soon as we start to rid ourselves of the conditioning and the reactions, the judgments, then all of a sudden things out there don't become an issue anymore. Sharing, as you said, sharing the space with people doesn't become much of an issue anymore. Because there can only be an issue when there's thought, when there's identification with thought, with conditioning, with reactions. I don't like this person, or I don't agree with this person. These are all just thoughts which are based on, conditioning. So when we've seen through the illusions and we've gone away from the conditioning, then what remains is just seeing everything as it is, without any labels, without any judgments, without condemning anybody. And that is freedom. That is true freedom. And then it doesn't become an issue anymore. Or that's been my experience.
And I think Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead, finish.
Yeah, we really.
We'll just do that now. How about that? I don't mean to be a clown.
Oh, it's all good fun, isn't it? So yeah, we just forgot what I was.
We told ourselves this was a learning experience.
Yeah, that's it. Why not have a good laugh?
Yeah. You have to laugh at I gotta laugh at myself, so it's funny. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Sorry, it is so humid in here. But yeah, not going the distance, not completing, and there is no judgment that comes with understanding, that wasn't necessarily them, that was an action or a reaction. That might not be a reaction to me, and it's a condition, it's an automatic response.
I think as well, just to add to that as well, Nico, is when you understand that most people are living from conditioning, then you realise that most people's behaviours are not actually their own. It's not who they are. It's an illusion. It's just they're just reacting on that conditioning.
Right.
And I think that gives you a compassion. That creates a compassion for the other person, where you don't take things personally anymore. There's nothing personal in it anymore. There's nothing,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's very much the case with most folks. And especially when you're dealing with people who have long-term relationships with each other. Married, couples who've been married for decades, or families even. At some point in time, I think the biggest and best treatment, for any sort of malaise that may be, sort of plaguing them at that point in time, it might be to realize, okay, is this expired medicine? Is this all really, I guess you could say, present tense? Is this, if it's not, that's okay. And then all of a sudden it has more to do with, okay, what do we take responsibility for, and what do we just sort of release? What do we release? And I think that people don't tend to release because, releasing is a dismissal, if you haven't noticed. As far as social martial arts go, at least for those of us, in the English-speaking countries, social martial arts, release is a dismissal, which is a horrible comparison. I don't like that association, but a lot of times it sounds like. And taking responsibility would be to admit defeat, which, we should not be afraid to admit when we may have done something, to hurt somebody else, if we really did. If amends are necessary, if love is necessary, love is always necessary. But I think that what is interesting with a lot of these relationships that, can get so wrapped up and so difficult is exactly what you said. It's a program. It's a visceral reaction, I guess you could say, if I may put it so harshly,
Yeah, I mean, the tellers, obviously psychologists now say that, I think they said something like 95% of people's thinking is actually invisible to them. It's subconscious thinking, unconscious thinking.
Hmm.
So people are reacting and making choices from this unconscious conditioning and reactions and thought processes. So most people's decisions are actually not their own. They're coming from conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
And when you become, when you meditate or you become the observer, the witness, what you're doing is you're shining the conscious mind on the subconscious mind. And so that's why you're able to then be aware of all these unconscious thoughts that are happening. And at first it can seem like, wow, God, my mind's busier than ever. But all it is that you've become aware of the unconscious mind patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can start weeding them out. You know what I mean? You know, start seeing through them, start seeing them for what they are.
Right.
Oh, this isn't me. That's not me. And the more that we do that, again, we become purer and purer until eventually we are totally free of conditioning. But what people tend to do, as you've just said, is that they actually repress. They don't want to face a lot of these thoughts, and so everything is repressed. Everything is put to the back of the mind, which is the subconscious mind. And what's happening is that they're actually storing it in the subconscious mind, and it's gonna rear its head at some point.
It very well will. And there's an interesting thing I've noticed about the topic of repression. On the surface, it would almost seem as though the equal opposite. It is that sort of overzealous attempt to purge everything too quickly, too readily. I'm sure you've encountered this, where it's all of a sudden, let's see if I can go through this grieving process in a week. Let's see if we can, let's race this, and it's. I've noticed that, it is still a stick, and that could be a very glamorous act of repression, perhaps. I mean, I can't really say. That could be something else. But no, I think that repression is a very good, a good issue to look at, because, I mean, there are some things that we don't, want to face. Either we can tell ourselves it's not timely, or we can tell ourselves that it's too difficult. And then there's also the part where some of us, as far as, the greater populace is concerned, I mean, there are plenty of people who romanticize those issues. It's a quirk, I don't know if I'd want to, that to be a quirk, anything like that to be a quirk, but, these things turn into quirks in our society. I personally think that we have a tendency to nurture that, which I don't agree with, but, it's the debilitating quirks is what I've started to call them. I mean, have you sort of encountered the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like Western culture, really. I mean, let's take something, for instance, like death, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about things being repressed, death is something that is very repressed, In Western society, we hide death away.
Right.
It's in cemeteries that are kind of moved out of the way. When there's funerals, everybody's dressed in black, and most people see it as a very negative, depressing thing.
Mm-hmm.
People don't want to talk about it because, again, they see it as being a negative thing. But yet, if we look at other cultures, they have death on display. They openly discuss death. It's openly accepted. And there's something very important in that, because whatever we repress can become a fear. And if we're not dealing with that fear, then that fear will hold us back. Whereas if we are able to not repress it, to become aware of it, to discuss it, to embrace it, then we transmute it. And, there's no bigger fear than the fear of death for people, But, I would say so. I would say that there's probably not many more, even the smaller things like the fear of rejection.
Right.
Really, the fear of rejection is, when we look closely at it, it is the fear of death as well. Because it's the fear of not being acknowledged, of not being there,
Yeah, fear of obscurity. Essentially. No, that makes perfect sense.
So we need to, the more open we are to look at anything, to not repress it, then the less we will be in states of fear, the more open we'll be as individuals and as a culture as well.
I agree with you there. I really do. On the topic of being more free, not repressing, I'm playing with the notion of or thinking a lot about toxic affirmations, toxic confirmations. It's there's a reason I don't really reach out to a lot of folks, as far as, this, what we do. Because I've noticed that there is still a lot of bombardment of, we I guess we could say plied each other with, with a lot of negative information, or I guess you could say toxic information. I mean, self-oppressing affirmations of how hard, debilitating and cruel the world is, as it is. And people do that even for themselves in this process of waking up. There's this affirmation of the difficulty when, wouldn't you agree that a better thing to say is, I can handle this with grace and, and some poise and, look good while doing it. Wouldn't it be better to, to actually affirm that you are up for you are apt for the challenge. You are the right person for the experience, as opposed to trying to affirm the issue.
Absolutely, yeah. So many people get caught in that trap where they are focusing on the so-called negative. What is wrong with everything? What is wrong with the person? What is wrong with themselves? What is wrong with the world? But actually, what you put your energy into, you magnify. Whereas if we were able to say, well, what is good? What is positive? What do we like? What do we like about ourselves? What do I like about this other person? What do I like about the world? If we focus on that, and again, it's not like you're ignoring the so-called difficulties or challenges that are going on in the world. Often you will see what's happening in the world, but then you realize that the only thing you can do is not to point the finger anymore, but is actually to change yourself and focus more on the positive in others and in the world.
Well,
the governments, people often talk about governments and, the governments are to blame for this and to blame for that. And relatively, yes, there is some truth to that, but ultimately the government is just a reflection of the people.
Right.
The government is just a reflection of it's a state of consciousness. If there were more people that were in a higher state of consciousness, then the government would also be in a higher state of consciousness. So it's a reflection. And so the change really comes within each one of us. And it always has done, and it will always be that way because it's always a reflection. But at the same time, just to finish this off, at the same time, we're all here to do what we're all here to do as well, and everybody has their own individual role. And so, it's some people's destiny, if you will, maybe, to be doing whatever they're doing. There's room, there is a need also, as we're playing this all out, for there to be the activists, for there to be these people that are pointing out the corruption in the government and everything. It's all okay, but essentially, real powerful change comes from only focusing on being the best that you can be here,
No, I completely agree, and I think that you draw an interesting line, I guess you could say. There is a difference between as far as the communities are concerned, even online, especially, there's a difference between a spiritual awakening and a geopolitical awareness. Okay, I can see this is what's going on. Okay, where do we go from here? And then there's the spiritual awakening, which does, reform environments. And that actually is a priority that I think that a lot of people are taking unto themselves. Let's wake up, let's open some heart centers, let's get this going. And I feel as though at this stage in the game there is an association, or there is, I guess, still a conditioning, with the need to avenge.
Yeah.
Vengeance.
Yeah.
The notion of justice, you know, in that sense.
Yeah. Who's justice?
Justice. Yeah.
Who's justice? It's, you know, everybody's own interpretation of what justice means, isn't it? You know?
Right. Are you trying to, you know, reform, are you trying to use the legal system to tango with the creator of that legal system? Are you trying to, you know, how are you going to handle this? We have to think outside the box. And, but the preoccupation was trying to, again, avenge hurt feelings or, you know, get explanations, you know, for past experiences and things like that. Again, it's that attachment to past experiences only in a negative sense that I think really holds a lot of people back. You know, working with folks who are trying to deal with even personal issues, you know, I need an explanation, I need a justification, I need, you know, let's really make this, you know, it'll slow you down. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It will slow you down to do that kind of work. You know, too much.
I see really, from what I can see, I see kind of three main categories of people, if you will, where there are those that are completely, you know, conditioned and, if you will, unconscious of what is going on and who they are. Then there are those that have awakened to, as you say, geopolitical issues and the corruption, maybe have had a taste of what they may be, and they resist. They are the ones that are there resisting the government, you know. And then there is a third category, if you will, where there is those that are that act as like a bridge between the two.
Yeah.
And they are the people that are really spiritually in tune, and they'll work with everybody to try and build those bridges. So, for instance, some people that may resist, let's use the government as an example, they would say, I would not work with the government because I don't like what the government does, I wouldn't work with them. Whereas the third category of person would work with them because they'd build that bridge. Because there's no better way than to... anybody that's involved in corruption it's a form of ego. It's a form of ego consciousness.
Yes.
And so they're unconscious of what they're doing also, you know. And it takes that injection of that higher consciousness. Somebody's got to play that role of injecting that higher consciousness in, you know, and building those bridges. And I don't feel that we would get anywhere unless that was happening.